In the winter of the 15th century, travelers crossing the forests of Eastern Europe told stories about a prince who dined among the dead. They said the roads into his kingdom were lined with bodies, men, women, children, lifted into the air on wooden stakes, left twisting beneath black birds, while the wind carried the smell of death for miles. Some believed he was insane. Others believed he was protecting Europe from invasion. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. If you entered his land, fear arrived before you did. His name was Vlad III. History would remember him as Vlad the Impaler, and centuries later the world would give him another name, Dracula. But the real story is far darker than the legend, because Vlad was not a vampire. He was real, and for a brief moment in history, he became one of the most feared rulers on Earth. He was born in 1431 in the city of Sighișoara, deep within the region of Transylvania, in what is now Romania. At the time, Europe was fractured, violent, and constantly shifting under the pressure of war. To the south stood the Ottoman Empire, a rising superpower expanding steadily into Europe. And caught between Christian kingdoms and Ottoman armies was a vulnerable land called Wallachia. That was Vlad's home. His father, Vlad II, ruled Wallachia under impossible pressure. To survive, he balanced loyalty between stronger powers, Hungary on one side, the Ottomans on the other. Vlad II belonged to the Order of the Dragon, created to defend Christianity against Ottoman expansion. From this title, Dracul, meaning dragon or sometimes devil, his son inherited the name Dracula, son of Dracul. But childhood for Vlad would not be filled with peace. It would be shaped by fear. When Vlad was still a boy, his father was forced into a political bargain with the Ottoman Sultan Murad II. To prove loyalty, he surrendered 2 of his sons as hostages to the Ottoman court. One of them was Vlad. The other was his younger brother, Radu. The boys were taken far from home, into the heart of the Ottoman Empire. For years, Vlad lived among the empire that threatened his homeland. He was educated there, trained there, and constantly watched. If their father betrayed the Sultan, they would die. Vlad adapted quickly. He learned military tactics and the brutal realities of power. Ottoman punishments were harsh and public. Violence became normal. But while Radu adjusted to Ottoman life, Vlad grew bitter. He hated dependence. He hated humiliation. And slowly, something inside him hardened. Then came the news that changed everything. Back in Wallachia, political enemies had turned against Vlad's father. In 1447, Vlad II was captured and murdered. Worse still, Vlad's older brother Mircea was reportedly buried alive after being tortured and blinded. Vlad was still a teenager when he learned his family had been destroyed. From that moment forward, revenge became the center of his life. Years later, amid chaos and civil war in Wallachia, Vlad finally returned home. The country he inherited was unstable, corrupt, and full of nobles, constantly betraying one another for power. And Vlad decided fear would be the solution, not diplomacy, not mercy, fear. When he seized the throne in 1456, Wallachia changed almost immediately. Vlad believed weakness invited invasion. To him, terror was strategy. He began targeting the boyars, the powerful nobles he blamed for his father's death, and Wallachia's instability. According to legend, Vlad invited many of them to a grand feast during Easter celebrations. They ate, they drank, and then soldiers entered the hall. The elderly were impaled immediately. The younger nobles were marched into forced labor. Many worked to death building Vlad's mountain fortresses. Whether every detail is true remains debated. But one thing is certain. Vlad eliminated rivals with horrifying efficiency, and impalement became his signature. The process was designed not only to kill, but to terrify. Victims were forced onto sharpened wooden stakes, pierced the body slowly, often avoiding vital organs, so death could last for hours, sometimes days. The stake would then be raised upright, displaying the corpse publicly. It was psychological warfare turned into spectacle. Soon, the forests and roads of Wallachia became warnings. Disobedience meant agony. And strangely, crime began disappearing. One story claimed Vlad placed a golden cup beside a public fountain in the capital city of Târgoviște. Anyone could drink from it, but no one dared steal it, because everyone knew what Vlad would do to the thief. Whether legend or fact, the story reflected something real. Under Vlad's rule, fear created order. Merchants reportedly traveled more safely through Wallachia than before. Corruption decreased. Criminals vanished from the streets. But peace built on terror comes at a terrible cost. And Vlad's greatest test was still approaching. The Ottoman Empire had not forgotten Wallachia. Now ruled by Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, the Ottomans demanded tribute and obedience. At first, Vlad cooperated cautiously. Then he stopped paying. It was an act of rebellion against one of the most powerful empires in the world. The Sultan responded with threats. Vlad answered with blood. In the winter of 1461, he launched raids into Ottoman territory, burning villages and massacring thousands. In letters to European rulers, Vlad openly boasted about the deaths he caused. This was no longer survival. This was open war. Mehmed II assembled a massive army and marched toward Wallachia to destroy him. Vlad knew he could not defeat the Ottomans in open battle. So instead, he turned the land itself into a nightmare. Wells were poisoned, villages burned, fields destroyed. At night, Vlad attacked unexpectedly, striking camps under darkness before disappearing back into forests. One assault became legendary, known as the Night Attack of 1462. Vlad and his men infiltrated the Ottoman camp in darkness, attempting to assassinate Sultan Mehmed himself. Chaos exploded through the camp as horses panicked and soldiers killed one another in confusion. Vlad failed to kill the Sultan, but he succeeded in something else: fear. And then came the sight that would echo through history. As the Ottoman army approached Târgoviște, they found a field of death outside the city. Thousands upon thousands of bodies impaled on stakes. Some accounts claim around 20,000 corpses stood there. Men, women, children. A forest made not of trees, but human bodies. The smell alone was unbearable. Even hardened Ottoman soldiers reportedly stopped in horror. According to chroniclers, Sultan Mehmed himself was deeply shaken, because this was not ordinary brutality. It was a message. Vlad was telling the world that invading his land would cost more than victory was worth. And for a moment, it worked. The Ottomans eventually withdrew, but Vlad's methods had created enemies everywhere. European merchants spread horrifying stories about him through printed pamphlets, the medieval equivalent of viral propaganda. German publications described him as a monster obsessed with torture and death. Some stories were exaggerated, some entirely fabricated, but many were rooted in truth. Vlad understood the power of terror better than almost any ruler of his age, and eventually, that terror isolated him. Political allies abandoned him. Hungarian King Matthias Corvinus, who once supported him, imprisoned Vlad instead. For over a decade, the feared prince disappeared into captivity. But history was not finished with him yet. Years later, Vlad regained power briefly in Wallachia. The kingdom was still unstable. Ottoman influence remained strong. Enemies surrounded him from every side. And then, sometime in late 1476, Vlad Dracula vanished into history. His death remains uncertain. Some accounts say he died in battle against Ottoman forces. Others claim he was assassinated by his own men during combat. There are even stories that his severed head was sent to Constantinople as proof of his death. But perhaps the strangest mystery came afterward. Vlad was supposedly buried at a monastery on an island in Snagov. Centuries later, archaeologists opened the tomb believed to contain his body. It was empty. No corpse, no prince, nothing. And that absence helped transform history into legend. 400 years later, an Irish writer named Bram Stoker searched for a name for his fictional vampire count. During his research, he encountered references to Vlad Dracula. The name fascinated him. Dark, ancient, perfect. And so Count Dracula was born. But Stoker's vampire shared little with the real Vlad beyond the name. The real Dracula did not sleep in coffins. He did not fear sunlight. He did not drink blood like a monster from folklore. What he consumed was fear. And in many ways that was even more terrifying, because vampires belonged to fiction. Vlad the Impaler belonged to history. Even today, historians argue over who he truly was. To some Romanians, Vlad remains a national hero, a ruler who defended his land against Ottoman conquest and crushed corruption with ruthless discipline. To others, he was a sadistic tyrant who transformed cruelty into theater. Perhaps he was both, a man shaped by betrayal, hostage years, war, and revenge. A prince born into a brutal century who learned that mercy often meant death. But what makes Vlad unforgettable is not simply the violence. History is full of violent rulers. It is the image he created, the prince who weaponized horror so effectively that entire armies feared entering his lands, the ruler whose name survived longer than kingdoms, the man whose story blurred the line between human and monster so completely.